Amen. Amen. Please be seated. And we truly do. We stand up for Jesus. We stand up and we are counted. We make a difference. We let our light shine. We let love impact not only our own lives, our own attitudes, our own actions, but we allow that love of God that has transformed our life to permeate, to flow, to dictate, and to make a difference in the lives of those around us. Not my love, it's very limited, it's a very self-centered love, but the love of God, the love that has changed us, the love that compels us, the love with which God sends us. We stand up with that. And we know that our lives, your life, my life, can and will make a difference when we allow God to have His way, when we allow God's love to change us. It's that love that will change the world. Amen. Well, there's a little boy, and he's fascinated. He's watching his mother put some of this cold cream on her face. And he goes to her, he's watching her rub that cold cream on her face, and that little boy, he says, "Well, Mommy, why are you putting that cold cream on your face?" Well, and Mommy says, "Well, I want to make myself beautiful." And so the boy just says, "Well, didn't know it was necessary." But and then he's watching her mom, and then it was just a minute later, she's wiping that off. She's wiping that cold cream off, and the little boy says, "What's the matter, Mom? Did you give up trying to make yourself beautiful?" He didn't understand it. He didn't get it. But that was the conclusion that he came to. Well, happy Mother's Day. It's not easy being a mother. It's not easy. If you have children, you know it, regardless of their age. One mom said she's going to try something different next summer. She's got different plans for next summer. Next summer, she's going to try this. Next summer, she's going to send the dog to camp and the kids to obedience school. Well, Irma Bombeck once wrote, "What mother has never fallen on her knees when she's gone into her room, to her son's bedroom, and prayed, 'God, please, no more. You were only supposed to give me as much as I could handle.'" Well, it's not easy. It's certainly not easy to be a mother. As someone has once said, the hand that rocks the cradle is usually attached to an arm, which is attached to someone who's not getting enough sleep. Of course, sometimes it's not easy having a mother either. George Wallace, comedian, he says, "I grew up hearing the dumbest things come from my mother. She said this is the last time I'm ever going to tell you to take the trash out." He said, "Well, thank you." Well, maybe mom's advice sometimes does seem a little silly. One mother, Pam Hodgkin, tells us about when her son arrived back to the United States after having been in Afghanistan fighting with the Marines. She says she still couldn't help herself reacting like a mother when she saw her son with a bayonet in his hand running across the base, and she shouts out, "Kevin, stop running with that bayonet in your hand." She just couldn't help herself. You know, every mom has done it at one time or another, but let's face it, where would we be? We would be lost without our mothers. There's a story about this couple. They're moving across the country, and they needed to drive their two cars. So mom drove one car, dad drove the other car. The 8-year-old son, Nathan, he worried, how are we ever going to stay together on this cross-country trek? Dad reassured him, "Well, we're just going to drive slow, and so it won't be hard, you know, for one car to follow the other." But little Nathan says, "But what if we do get separated?" Well, Dad goes on to say, he probably shouldn't have said, he says, "Well, then if we do get separated, I guess we'll just never see each other again." To which Nathan says, well, then I'm going to ride with Mother. Smart guy. Actually, the situation can be summed up in the words of one mom when she said, I'd like to be the ideal mother. The only problem is I'm busy raising kids right now. Well, the scripture reading, I'd like us to turn this time to the Gospel of John. To the Gospel of John, chapter 15, and let's read together, beginning in verse 9. The Gospel of John, chapter 15, beginning in verse 9. If you have your Bibles, if you'd like to turn there, read along with me. Here's what it is. Here's what we find. This is what it says. As the Father, Jesus speaking, as the Father has loved me, so I love you. Now remain in my love. If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have obeyed my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. Then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. This is my command: love each other. So just a couple of thoughts this morning out of that passage, out of John chapter 15, verses 9 to 17, just a couple of them. Things that we can draw from this passage. Mother's Day lessons on love. We notice that love is a command. Now, for those of you who feel that love is a feeling, this might be a stumbling stone. Obviously, Jesus did not view love primarily as a feeling. It's something else. Therefore, he can say love is a command. I command you, this is my command I give to you, love one another. Jesus isn't just giving us a suggestion that we love one another. This is a command to be a follower of Jesus Christ, to be born again. We're filled with his Spirit. It's a spirit of love. We love our families. We love our mothers. We love our friends. We're even told, commanded, instructed, and it's also been modeled. Jesus modeled it himself. We're even to love our enemies. John chapter 13, verse 35 begins by saying this: by this all men will know that you are my disciples. Okay, here we go. How are we to be recognized? What is it that others will recognize Christ in us for or through or because of? How will we be known as disciples of Jesus Christ? If you love one another. You know, if we could just pause, maybe sometimes things come to mind. It's, you know, sometimes it's so easy to love that orphan over in a third world country, isn't it? So easy to love someone that we really don't directly know or deal with or rub elbows with. And yet sometimes some of the greatest struggles that we have when it comes to loving one another are loving the people that are sitting here this morning. Here in this room, sometimes the greatest difficulties we have is not loving somebody in some other country, Someone maybe we saw, I saw these guys at a conference, or I saw this person, in a restaurant, and oh man, I just love that person. And now I really don't know him personally. We never really met. We never shook, never hugged, never talked. But I just love that person. We need to love one another. We need to love those. We need to work on that. We need to get better at that. Loving those that we see, that we know, that we bump into, that we fellowship with, that we do ministry with, that we live with, that we work with. Relationships, friends, are the hardest things that we will deal with in life. Loving one another, obeying this command is the hardest thing that we're going to deal with. Relationships are what cause us more stress and more struggle than anything else. Certainly, we are going to go through great health issues, great struggles health-wise, great struggles financially. On a whole, though, it's our relationships. It's loving one another. It's doing what Jesus is telling us right here to do, and is to love one another. And that also includes, I guess somebody could say, hello. That also includes loving those that we go to church with, that we sit in the pews with, that we do ministry with. Jesus says, love one another. This is how you will be known as my disciple. You can't get more direct than that. There really aren't any other rules for the Christian faith besides this one. Love one another. This one's ironclad. We are to love. Of course, this is not the first time that Jesus lifted up love as a command. We read about this in Matthew's Gospel. An expert in the law tested Jesus with a question. And he approached Jesus and he said, Teacher, Rabbi, which law is the greatest command? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and this is the greatest commandment. And Jesus said, and here's one more just like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commands. There was this little test given in school, and I know there's tests given quite often in school. And this was not a math class, this was an English class. There's a little boy in elementary school, he was given a test in English grammar, and he was being tested on the perfect tense of verbs. One question had a column of verbs in the present tense, and then there was a column, another column. They had to put the perfect form of this verb in the other column, the opposite column. And he came to the verb live. And in the opposite column for the perfect tense of the word live, what do you think he wrote? He wrote the word love. Well, grammatically, he's wrong. But when it comes to life, when it comes to living out our life, when it comes to a Christian standpoint, when it comes to the teachings of Jesus, he was right on target. The perfect form of to live is to love. John Ortberg, he's an author, he talks about a friend of his who had a tough life. This man had virtually no father growing up, and his mother was a very difficult person. She married 5 times. None of these relationships lasted. She had little time for her children, and she gave them very little encouragement. This adult man, John Ortberg's friend, still carries many wounds around inside of him because of her lack of attention toward him and toward his siblings However, late in his life, his mother developed a degenerative muscular disease and gradually lost almost every physical capacity. And so you can imagine how difficult she was to care for. And none of her other children would have anything to do with her. Neither would any of the men that she had been married to. No one would have anything to do with her except this one friend of John Ortberg's. And Ortberg says, my friend decided to love her. He took her into his home. He cared for her. He fed her by hand, combing her hair, cleaning up her messes, and about all she could do was cry and moan non-stop. Ortberg thought to himself about his friend, how can he do this? How can he stand this woman? John says, I've been given so many blessings, the church, scripture, family, so many more blessings than this guy, it would seem. And yet I don't know if I could do for my mother what he's doing for his mother, who had rejected him and ignored him all his life. When his friend's mother died, 16 people came to the funeral. None of her other kids came. The son who cared for her had a little toy tape recorder his mother had gotten him one Christmas, and he played a tape of he and his mom singing a Christmas carol. He talked about how she loved Christmas and how that when he was a kid, he would play the guitar and she would sing with him. Ortberg says he didn't love her perfectly, not by a long shot, but he loved her when loving was hardest. He loved her when no one else loved her, and he remembered her with kind words. That must have been difficult, loving her when she showed him so little love. But friends, isn't that what God's love is all about? That's the kind of love that Christ gave us while we were undeserving, yet he still loved us. Jesus says love is a command. That's the first thing. He doesn't say anywhere it's a feeling. Oh, it can be a feeling. It can be a good feeling, and love can bring with it bad feelings too, but we're not, it's not based on a feeling. Feelings are like weather. They come and go and change rapidly. Love is a command. Jesus, love one another. Notice this, secondly, that love is sacrificial. Love is sacrificially. I think just along John Ortberg's friend proved it, revealed it, lived it out. It's a sacrifice. Jesus says this in John chapter 15, verse 13, greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. For many of us, love is this squishy emotion without any real content. And we think love is, well, I love you because of what you can do for me. I love you because of what you bring in to this relationship. And that's often the basic rule of love. How can you help me? How can you serve me? What do you bring in? What do you contribute? You meet my needs, and because you do, well, then I'll have a warm feeling toward you. And I think that's a lot of the love that we sing about. And we, on our secular radio stations or our country western songs, Either you sing about love, a pickup truck, and a hound dog. A lot of these country western songs. Superficial. We know that in our hearts. We recognize somehow deep down within us that true love is sacrificial. We know that Jesus' love is sacrificial. There's a story about two tribes in the Andes. Two tribes, and they were at war. They were constantly at war with one another. One tribe lived in the lowlands. The other lived high up in the mountains. And one day, that mountain tribe, these mountain people, they invaded the lowlanders. And as part of their plundering, they kidnapped a baby of one of the lowland families, and they took that infant with them up into the mountain. Now, these lowlanders did not know how to climb up into and through and navigate the mountains. They knew the fields, the grasslands, the prairies. It's there that they were at home. They didn't know any of the trails that the mountain people used. They didn't know where these mountain people went or how to get to them, how to find them, how to track them in the steep terrain. Even so, they sent their very best warriors, quick-footed, young men, strong warriors. They sent out this party of fighting men to climb the mountain and bring home that baby. Bring it back. We are not going to let this tribe of mountain people come and raid our tribe, our village, take one of our babies, and never give it back. Just take it away. We're not going to let it happen. We're sending our best men, fleet-footed, and we're going after that baby. We're going to bring it back. Well, these men, these soldiers, these fleet-footed guys, they tried first one method of climbing, then they tried another method, and then they tried one trail, then they tried another trail. After several days of effort, they climbed only just a couple 100 feet. Feeling hopeless and helpless, the lowlander men decided that the cause was lost, and they prepared to return to the village below. And so as they were packing their gear and coming down, descending down the mountain, that little bit that they had gone up, they looked up, and way up there they saw this woman coming down, one of their own women coming down. And they looked and they watched and they waited, and as she drew closer and closer, they saw that she was holding a baby. And they took another look and they saw that she was holding her baby coming down that mountain from way up on high. And one of the soldiers greeted her and said, "We're like the best fleet-footed men, warriors, soldiers in our village, and we could not get up there. We couldn't climb this mountain. We couldn't get up to their village to get your baby. How did you do this?" And she just stood there holding the baby and said, "Well, it wasn't your baby." Every parent worth their salt understands what took place on that mountain. There's nothing that we will not do for our children. Love is sacrificial. Of course, some of us are at that stage in life when it's our parents who now are needing some sacrificial love. Instead of us going, it's them the ones, they need the help. You may be part of what they're referring to as the sandwich generation. You know, you're caught between the needs of your children and the needs of your aging parents. And that certainly is also a difficult phase in life. A lady named Bev tells about a time years ago when her mother had come to visit her. Her mother asked Bev, her daughter, to go shopping with her. She wanted to buy a new dress. Bev confesses that she's not a patient person. She didn't look forward to going shopping with her mother, but, you know, she set off, and they set off together to the mall. Nonetheless, they visited nearly every store in the mall. And they tried on countless dresses. And her mother tried on dress after dress after dress, rejecting them all. And as the day wore on, Bev grew weary, and her mother grew frustrated. Finally, of course, at their last stop, her mother tried on a lovely blue three-piece dress. The blouse had a bow at the neckline, and as Bev stood in the dressing room with her mom, she watched as her mother tried with much difficulty to tie the bow. Her hands were so badly crippled from arthritis that she couldn't do it. Immediately, Bev's patience gave way to an overwhelming wave of compassion for her mother. She turned away at first to try to hide the tears that swelled up. But regaining her composure, she turned back to her mother to tie the bow for her. The dress was beautiful, and her mother bought it. Their shopping trip was over, but the event was etched indelibly in Bev's memory. For the rest of her day, this day, her mind kept returning to that moment in the dressing room and to the vision of her mother's hands trying to tie that bow. Those very hands that fed her, bathed her, dressed her, caressed and comforted her, and most of all prayed for her, were now touching her in a very remarkable manner. Later in the evening, Bev went into her mother's room, took her mother's hands in her own and kissed them. Then, much to her surprise, told her mom that to her they were the most beautiful hands in the world. Bev says she's so grateful that God let her see with new eyes what a precious, what a priceless gift a loving, self-sacrificing mother is. And Bev prays that someday her own hands and her heart will have earned such a beauty of their own. And I think some of us can relate to that simple story. You remember the many loving sacrifices your mom or your dad made in your behalf. And now you watch sadly as your parents struggle with aging. And now it's your turn to make the sacrifices. And once again, recognizing that it's not easy. Christ never promised that it would be easy, but love is sacrificial. Love is what life is all about. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the Apostle Paul summed it up like this. In verse 13, but these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Alan Peterson tells about a bus trip he took in Brazil. Up in the hills of Brazil, they're out in this big bus. He had dozed off as they were traveling from one site to another. And then all of a sudden he was awakened by a voice over the intercom. We have a very serious emergency. The brakes have given out. Prepare for a wreck. At first, the situation seemed unreal to Peterson. And then another voice came and barked, prepare for impact. And he found himself and everyone around him praying. As he buried his head in his lap and pulled up his knees, he said, "Oh God, thank you. Thank you for the incredible privilege of knowing you. Life has been wonderful." And as that bus grew closer and closer to the cliff, he says, my last cry was, "Oh God, my wife, my children." Peterson survived. As he wandered around the bus terminal afterwards, in a daze, aching all over, he found he couldn't speak. But his mind was racing. What were my last words? What was the bottom line? And as he remembered, he had his answer. My relationships. Reunited with his wife and sons, he found that all he could say to them over and over and over again is, I appreciate you. I appreciate you. He discovered, as sooner or later we all discover, the bottom line of life is love. Love is what life is all about. God created this world so that he could love us, so that he would have people that he could love. He loves you. God sent his only Son to die on the cross for each of us because he loves us. And he wants to spend eternity with us. So great is his love for us. And one day when we are gathered around God's throne with all those that we love, we will discover that the final payoff for living is love. These three remain: faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. And so today, let us be determined to live a life of love, that we would love one another. And in doing so, fulfill the greatest commandment of Christ. Shall we bow our heads for a word of prayer?